You discuss failure. One, it happens, but two, don't celebrate it.
Well, that's a complicated topic, and some of what I was writing was in reaction to something that I've heard at conferences increasingly over the last 4 or 5 years, and that is we should celebrate failure. And I think entrepreneurs may be getting the wrong idea, because entrepreneurs, they don't want to fail. They hate failure. They are going to succeed. They may have to change or modify. They have to be very, eyes open in terms of realizing the mistakes they're making and correcting them. But they certainly don't want to give up easily. That's not entrepreneurship. But on the other hand, as a society, it's really important to make it what I call structurally easy to fail in terms of bankruptcy and labor flexibility.
This gets to the role of government. You make a point time and time again in your writing about bankruptcy. Don't have the attitude that you should be hung, and we don't put people in prison anymore, but psychologically it is. But discuss things like bankruptcy, labor laws, maybe tax laws, things that the helping hand, you talk about the invisible hand and the helping hand.
Need each other.
Where government can actually help create an environment, even though they can't dictate what happens, they can create an environment where these things might have a chance of happening.
Well, I'm aware of the fact that I'm saying this in front of you, but the government is, in terms of entrepreneurship anyway, government has an essential role to play, but entrepreneurship doesn't depend on the government. It depends on lots of things. And if government plays that specific role, it can be very facilitative of entrepreneurship. There are many things that can be done, but some of the low-hanging fruit, and it's less of a problem in the United States and some Western countries, but you'd be surprised, or I'm surprised, that places such as France and other countries, that bankruptcy is not only stigmatized, but there are structural impediments against it. You have restrictions in doing another business while one company is in bankruptcy, your previous company is in bankruptcy, or getting even a personal bank account, and all these restrictions that put a very, very high price on, a structural price on failure. And that's an impediment that can be reduced. Labor inflexibility, in other words, restricting the ability of the entrepreneur to control his or her expenses, which are labor costs in part, is also a big inhibitor. Denmark's a really interesting example. They moved in the early 2000s from employment protection to unemployment insurance, and there was a big boost to entrepreneurship there because it wasn't enough, but it had a big impact. They call it flex security, and that's an example of a positive role that I think governments can play at the national level in particular.
One of the things you said governments can do, which sounds a little almost Pollyannish, is sort of what you might call hooray. When you get a hit, broadcast it, make a big deal of it, like Skype in Estonia and other successes.
It really makes a difference to entrepreneurs when the mayor gives them a phone call or invites them in to meet the press with the mayor, and the mayor says, you just got a sales contract, that's great, or you just got a big global partnership, or you're starting to export, that's great. And I realized that by itself, that's that's a caricature. But when it happens with other things, it can have an impact. And not only, but especially the publicly elected leaders, there's status involved in that. Even if you disagree with their politics, to be called up by a prime minister or president and congratulated for 10 seconds, it makes people feel really proud, and it does its own little job. Call me Pollyannish if you may.
No,
I don't think I am.
I think it's a very real thing. Yeah. One of the things you advise entrepreneurs is think international, even if you have a big protected market. If you don't think international, you make yourself much more vulnerable. Can you explain that?
Well, it depends also on the size of the market that the home market or the original market the entrepreneur is playing in, because there's certain businesses that can be made to be scaled pretty significantly in certain large markets. But even then, I think that in many, many cases, it makes you a much stronger entrepreneur to think globally, even though you may postpone the global part of your venture a little bit, but to think globally from the very beginning. And that can have very specific implications, such as hiring people that, among other things, speak different languages, have international experience, and may have a couple of passports. For example, it makes the ventures stronger, even if they're staying local for now.
In terms of entrepreneurs, have you done work on what you might call pairing, where two seem to do better than one alone? We see it, Allen and Gates, and we see it with Google. We see it with Henry Ford, a man nobody remembers now, James Couzens. Critical for that early success is when historians said about Ford, he couldn't run a small grocery store. Couzens couldn't put together a kiddie car kit. Yet together they created one of the greatest companies in the world at the time.
Stephen Jobs, the mythical Stephen Jobs, even had in Apple early on, quote unquote, adult supervision. So did Michael Dell. So maybe the conclusion is behind every great entrepreneur, there's a great entrepreneur. Because, and I know I've been a venture capitalist, and one of the things that we looked at was the leadership capabilities of the entrepreneur. If the entrepreneur wasn't able, even at the very early stages, to put together the seed, the core of a good team, and of people who were even better in some ways than he or she was, it was a risky investment, too risky an investment to make. It's a part of mythology that there are individual entrepreneurs. There are cases in which there are, but it's more part of the mythology than the reality. Oftentimes, really amazing entrepreneurship comes when there are really amazing teams of people.
A couple of things you hit on is that entrepreneurs aren't told enough is the ability to sell. And then the other thing you hit on is building an organization. No dull, nitty-gritty stuff, but if you don't get those two things right, your wonderful mousetrap is not going to go very far.
I think we, the public and the leaders, we've misled entrepreneurs. The educators, we've misled them too. By conveying the impression of all this snazzy glory, innovation, and so on, that's the heart of entrepreneurship. That's a part of entrepreneurship. But I've been seeing more and more in the last decade of my involvement how essential the ability to sell, for example, is. And I've heard entrepreneurs whom we've misled say, oh, I don't need to know how to sell. When I get going, I'll hire a VP of sales. No, that the entrepreneur an inventor may not know how to sell, may not need to know how to sell, or just an innovator, but an entrepreneur has to know how to sell very well. And if you don't mind, give you the example again of Abi Shah, who at the age of 17, he was born in Ahmedabad, Gujarati Hindu.
Selling Bibles.
Selling Bibles in the deep south at the age of 17. And the first summer, this was to pay his way through school. Even though his parents could afford it, they said, you've got to learn to make it yourself. And he did it by pure selling. He's a Gujarati Hindu selling Bibles in the deep south, door to door. Not only that, he's buying them and selling them, and his money only comes from the profits he makes. He's not getting a salary. And after one summer, 2 summers in the sweltering heat, he learned how to actually make sales. And
now, what was it about him, which I think separates entrepreneurs? After that horrific first summer, he went and voluntarily did it again.
Yeah, I think that's just a testimony to his grit. But if you met him, you wouldn't have the impression as a salesman. He's not trying to push something on you. He's trying to understand you and speak to your needs. And good salesmanship involves listening too, engaging, and he does that amazingly well. But I think all entrepreneurs have to learn how to do that. Now, I'd like to say that we talk about scale up, and I use that term a lot, that entrepreneurs, if they don't scale up, they're not entrepreneurs. I like to say that sale is, S-A-L-E, that's 80% of scale. It's a big part. And we just have to inculcate that and teach people that.
You'd think with Steve Jobs, who, if anything, was a showman,
a great salesman,
people would learn from that.
Amazing salesman.
Everything was the greatest thing since whatever.
It's not dirty.
No, of course not.
But I think that's the impression that a lot of us, and I blame ourselves, have been conveying to people. Organization building also. Entrepreneurs, we don't teach them that that's an important thing to do. To build scale, you need an organizational platform. Well, that involves hiring people, knowing how to build compensation packages, building procedures, all the boring things. Oh, that's not sexy, that's not interesting. Well, without that, you're not going to be an entrepreneur.
And countries, changing cultures. You make the point, even in most hospitable environment, within a decade, a generation, it can turn around profoundly.
Yes.
Can you cite
It can,
some examples?
yes. Well, a good example, I think, is Ireland, where roughly 25, 30 years ago, the ideal for parents was their kids to get a salaried job or be individual professionals. And that's changed in pockets in Ireland. That's changed significantly. And there's a lot of really great entrepreneurship, medical devices, even pharmaceuticals, information technology, software. There's a lot of great entrepreneurship. And that change and that appreciation of entrepreneurship, I think that happened in less than a decade in Ireland. Israel's another good example.
Well, Israel...
of lots of things.
Of lots of things, because as I think you've discussed in your writings, in the 60s and 70s, Israel on paper was a hopelessly regulated, overtaxed economy.
In the 90s, up until the 90s.
And yet you had these entrepreneurs against horrific odds, even before the government recognized we should be encouraging this kind of thing. We're doing some amazing things in high tech.
Yes. So it's a nuanced story there, and I know the history pretty well. But it's true that there was entrepreneurship breaking through before parts of the government and economic policies matched, so that in the 90s, when entrepreneurship, well, it even started taking off in the 80s, but even into the 90s, very large parts of the Israeli economy were owned by the government and by the labor, by the unions.
Yes.
That's changed, and there were policies that made it difficult to be an entrepreneur. The government, but to its credit, it's a nuanced story. Even from the very founding of the country, the notion that we don't have natural resources, which has changed in the last couple of years, but we don't have natural resources, we have to invest in brains and build industry around knowledge. That's been part of the ethos and worked its way into policy as well, at the same time that parts of the policy were very socialistic. And by the way, in the 80s and 90s, capitalism was a bad word, was a pejorative. Still, even though entrepreneurship was breaking through.
And cite the story of Rwanda after the horrific events of 1994, in a continent that looked like it was hopeless economically. It's become a success story.
Yes, Rwanda is very interesting. The leadership there made a decision to build connected micro enterprises and around several sectors. One was tea, another one was tourism, for example, and was very successful in increasing people's incomes dramatically. The real challenge for Rwanda, I think, is taking that and taking it to the next level, where there are truly growing global enterprises that can come out of that, or any other environment that's been traumatized.
What would you recommend to Rwanda?
Oh, I think that's a big one for me, but because I'm not current with the economic and social policies right now, and I know that they've been suffering a little bit in terms of their international reputation on the political side and the transparency side, but I really don't have enough information to give advice to Rwanda.
On another subject, the wisdom of crowds may be true in jelly beans in a jar,
And books.
but buying books, yes. But crowdfunding, you think, is just a formula for disaster?
Well, so we have to make distinctions among different types of crowdfunding. Some of them have proven themselves, and there's logic that says that they can serve their purpose. So there's donation crowdfunding, product crowdfunding, and royalty crowdfunding, even debt crowdfunding.
Equity?
And there's equity crowdfunding. The criticism that I've made, and I've made with the Jobs Act of last year, is the part of the equity crowdfunding. that is of completely different ilk. It's an optical illusion that you can draw a straight line from donation crowdfunding, such as Kickstarter, which I think has been an unmitigated success, and draw a straight line to that, to getting the crowd to invest in these very highly risky, early stage ventures in which, by definition, not a whole lot is known. I think there's a very strong argument can be made that as an asset class, the returns on crowd-funded stock purchases have to be negative.
You make the point that even doing legal work on little things, $50,000.
Well, in venture capital, we would spend a lot of money because we were going to invest a lot of money. So we spent a lot of money and a lot of time, a lot of human people hours, in studying every aspect of the investment that we could before taking the risk, which even after everything was cleared up that could be, was still very risky. In the kinds of ventures that equity crowdfunding is targeting, you can't afford to make those investments up front, because make those investments of time,
right,
and due diligence. You can't afford to do it.
So in terms of closing, in terms of the role of government, what can it do and what can it do? And if you could bring in Milwaukee, where you're working, and Edmonton.
So
real life examples.
Thank you. We've started a project in partnership with a few organizations. One of them is American Express Open for Enterprise, which is a national organization, well-known company, and some local organizations, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, the GMC, the university, all in partnership. And I've used a phrase that captures at a sort of conceptual level what we're trying to do. I call it intelligent evolution. Is, can you intentionally foster an ecosystem, which by definition is not something that you can control. It only exists because the parts interact based on their self-interest. The entrepreneurs, and by the way, I think entrepreneurship is a natural act. You see it everywhere in the world in some form or another.
Yep.
It's a natural act. The entrepreneurs are entrepreneuring because that's natural. They're doing it because they think it's in their benefit. The investors are investing because they think it's to their benefit, and so on and so forth. So how do you, as a society, a region, say a city such, or a region such as Milwaukee, how do you intentionally foster that ecosystem? And one of the things I've developed over the last 4 years is a notion of the ecosystem consisting of culture, of finance, of education and human capital, of support organizations, access to markets, and of course policy and leadership. And what we do in a very concentrated way is do things to impact all of those, so they learn to interact with each other in a different way, to foster growth, to foster scale-ups, to foster the creation and capture of extraordinary value. So far the evidence, it's still not a done deal, I would say, but there is pretty good evidence and logic that this can be successful.
In Edmonton,
there we're
again,
just getting started. We did a first phase project, but it's exactly the same. It's all about focusing on scale up. And by the way, one of the I think misconceptions that we have to take responsibility for transmitting or creating is that entrepreneurship is only about starting something completely new. Well, there are a lot of companies out there that already know what a customer is. They already have sales. They know how to hire people. They know how to be leaders. What they don't know is how to grow from 1 to 5 million, 5 to 20 million. A certain percentage, it's a small percentage, but a certain percentage of those, I think, with support of the right kinds from everybody around them, can actually choose and be able to scale up. And when this is all common sense, Steve, but when a company grows from 1 million to 5 million in revenues, guess what they do? Naturally, they hire people. And guess what else they do? They create wealth. And guess what else they do? They satisfy customers. And guess what else? They pay taxes. Those are all good things. And it all is focused on the growth of entrepreneurial ventures. And that's what we're trying to do.
Dan, thank you very much.
Great pleasure, and thank you.